When this futureless loser is summoned to another world, he needs to quickly find a way to earn money, or he will perish from starvation. This is a type of isekai that we haven't encountered before. Well, perhaps that last part was a bit of an exaggeration. The story begins with Takeru Kamishiro, an ordinary salaryman with an unpleasant appearance and the most boring life imaginable. His daily routine was quite simple. He would wake up, go to work, return home, watch the dull news on TV, then sleep, and repeat the whole cycle. However, on one particular evening, as Takeru was watching television, he was unexpectedly presented with an opportunity to embark on something genuinely interesting, an offer extended by the very god who presides over the solar system. This god shows him a planet called Midias, which apparently suffers from the problem of civilizations that always end up perishing. Because the god is responsible for the planet Midias, it is his duty to ensure that world prospers, but as a cosmic entity, he cannot directly intervene. Therefore, he wishes for Takeru to become the new messiah of Midias, guiding them towards greatness and prosperity. Upon hearing this plan, Takeru falls into despair, as he is merely a common salaryman without any special talents. He even goes so far as to mention that he must return to his job, otherwise his boss would terminate his employment. But the god quickly reveals that the moment he brought Takeru to this dimension, he had already died in the real world. If he were to refuse this chance, his very soul would simply disappear for all eternity. This revelation leaves Takeru utterly shocked, but after he calms down, he realizes he has no alternative but to accept. Once he agrees to the task, the god bestows upon him several special powers before dispatching him to Midias. First, he imbues Takeru with magical attributes, fully maximizing his mana, and then inquires if there's anything further he desires. Takeru, being a man of questionable thoughts, considers asking for a harem. The god reads his intentions and assures the degenerate that on his journey he will encounter many beauties and have the opportunity to conquer them. He also bestows upon him a unique search ability. Following this, and after incorporating various other convenient enhancements such as a comprehensive understanding of all languages, diverse resistances, and even a mystical bag for his belongings, the deity unceremoniously dispatches him without so much as a proper farewell. When Takeru awakens and opens his eyes, he realizes he is seated beside a tree within a vibrant, verdant forest. He stands up, and his first thought is to search for a place where other people might be. After a period of wandering through the forest, he eventually catches sight of a village far off. He hasn't eaten anything since he arrived, so the hunger pangs begin to set in. However, he's not entirely certain if anyone would be inclined to offer him food without any charge. At that moment, he recalls the search ability bestowed upon him by the god, an ability that could assist him in collecting materials for sale and thus earning money. Filled with excitement, he exclaims loudly, "Activate search magic." To his utter embarrassment, nothing at all transpires, causing him to ponder if he might have botched the spell's invocation. Reluctantly, he writes the words in Japanese on the ground, and this time it works. Various holographic symbols show up next to objects like clovers, diamonds, and hearts, marking where the materials are located. Takeru uses the analysis function on one of the items, and in doing so, receives detailed information. For example, the system indicates that the moon herb is a yellow flower which blossoms under the crescent moon and is classified as rank B in rarity. Because of its rarity, Takeru collects it and stores it in his magic bag. Subsequently, he proceeds to collect various other materials, yet the majority prove to be of little worth. He then discerns that the clover symbol corresponds to flowers and herbs, the heart to life-related items, and the diamond to minerals and rocks. Now prepared, he heads to the village to sell his items, encountering Marlowe, the entrance guard, to whom he introduces himself as a wandering traveler. Because of his height, the guard asks if he's a knight or a swordsman, but Takeru explains he's just a merchant who gathers materials. Curious and interested, Marlowe leads him to the general store. As they walk, Takeru greets the villagers, his face flushing with embarrassment under their curious gazes. Upon entering the shop, he shows his items to the merchant, who is left impressed. Judging that Takeru is skilled in collecting, the shopkeeper asks him to retrieve mytil ore from a nearby mountain. The shopkeeper also purchases all the items Takeru had collected and brought in, paying 300,000 reeves, which is equivalent to $20,000. Takeru can hardly believe he got rich so quickly, but his greed gets the better of him. Driven by his hunger for greater success, he takes on the task, fully aware of the perils he will encounter on his journey to the mountain. However, prior to venturing into the mountains, Takeru opts to spend a night in repose, finding accommodations at a nearby inn. Inside the inn room, a maid came by to offer room service, but she regrettably informed him that baths weren't provided, since that particular luxury was reserved solely for the nobility. Takeru, though, discovers an alternative way to cleanse himself by using purification magic, which instantly leaves his body immaculate. Despite this, he remains dissatisfied, for nothing truly compares to the luxury of a long and relaxing bath. When he gets his first mission in this strange town, he decides to see it through. Along the way, he activates his search ability to locate precious items and of course doesn't miss the chance to collect everything he finds. His journey then takes him to the place known as the Forest of White Trees, or more precisely the Forest of Ancient Dragons. Little by little, he begins to grow accustomed to this new life, and once more, utilizing his special power, he perceives the diamond symbol. It was the first time he'd seen such a sign, and it could only mean something valuable was there. Without a second thought, he plunges through the foliage to investigate and ultimately discovers a decomposing corpse. Startled by the unpleasant scene, he figures that warrior must have died in combat. Despite this, he moves in closer and discovers a family amulet right next to the body, an item without a ranking. Even so, he picks up the object and discovers a letter inside. The message was from the warrior's sister, expressing gratitude for his efforts with their ailing father and imploring him to return home, whatever the expense. Regrettably, that man would never come back. The very least Takeru could do in such a situation was to ensure he received a proper and dignified burial. Thus he digs a grave, lays the warrior to rest, and offers a brief prayer in remembrance of him. Before the sun sets, he needs to find a secure spot to rest for the night. He uses barrier magic to shield himself through the night, and with the stones he gathered, ignites a fire. He mixes various leaves in a makeshift pot, preparing his very first meal in this new world, a dish he fondly names Takeru soup. To his surprise and delight, the flavor is surprisingly excellent, bringing him genuine joy. The next day he continues his journey, getting closer to the edge of the forest. On the way, he once again employed his search ability to locate more special items. However, he was taken aback to discover neither the ore he'd been informed about nor any of the monsters he'd been cautioned against were present. Puzzled, he ponders whether the creatures were fleeing due to his scent, yet he concludes that if it guaranteed his safety, it was indeed an advantage. Excited by the thought of reaching the mountain soon, he starts running toward the end of the forest. However, to his utter astonishment, he discovers an immense chasm situated between the mountains. Unprepared for such an obstacle, he is unable to brake in time and consequently plunges into the abyss. In a panic, he invokes every type of magic he's aware of, attempting to fly, and fortunately, he successfully manages to land securely within a cave. Using his search ability, he discovers the place is filled with ores and starts collecting them. However, he realizes he still hasn't found the true goal of his mission, the Metal Ore. When he enhances his ability, he finally detects the presence of Mithril, but before he can get closer, the cave starts to shake. He casts an explosive spell in that direction, scattering the ore fragments for easier collection. He manages to gather some, but only a small amount. And when he tries to continue, the cave starts to shake again. Takeru, instead of running away, decides to press forward with his torch, exploring the inside of the ancient cave. Further ahead, he finds the purest water he has ever seen in his life, even more valuable in this world where even a bath was not accessible. Upon touching it and analyzing it with his ability, he discovers that it was SS rank underground magic water, the most precious resource he had ever encountered up to that point. He also discovers that the water belonged to the ancient dragon of the underworld, which makes him question if the creature was truly present. Bold as always, he chooses to remain, and in fact a dragon was indeed there. His awakening power stirs the creature, which then roars, demanding to know who dared disturb it. But Takeru is so distracted that he doesn't even hear its voice at first. The enraged dragon emerges in all its imposing grandeur, water splashing onto Takeru, yet he holds his ground steadfastly. Noticing the dragon's fury, he bows apologetically and asks for forgiveness. After all, he had bowed countless times in his life as a salaryman, and now he was doing it before a dragon. He introduces himself as a human and repeats his apology for having disturbed it. The dragon, for its part, reveals its name, Voldius, and inquires about the man's identity. For Voldius, Takeru's mana was sufficient to awaken him, indicating that Takeru's power was at the same level as his own. However, Takeru dismisses this praise entirely. Still, Voldius, or V, as Takeru nicknames him, asks for a favor. He reveals that due to the stagnant water, his egg had not yet hatched. So, V asks Takeru to use his mana to hatch the egg. In exchange, he reveals he possesses a small amount of mithril ore and promises to hand it over to Takeru. The offer is quite tempting, particularly considering the immense value such a reward would entail. The problem is, Takeru had no idea how to hatch an egg. Voldius merely instructs him to simply channel his mana into the egg. Takeru, figuring that since it was an egg, he could also warm it, proceeds to do just that, yet all at once a mysterious power embraces him, utterly suffocating him. He hears Voldius' booming laughter and is immediately overcome with panic, wondering if the dragon had orchestrated this entire situation simply to bring about his demise. In utter despair, he plunges into the water and begins to drown, enraged at having been given a second chance at life only to be on the cusp of perishing without truly experiencing this new world. As his eyes finally close, a mysterious figure materializes before him. He considers if it's the god once more, yet swiftly discerns it bears no resemblance to the deity he'd encountered previously. The creature remarks that most individuals confronted with a dragon would flee or collapse, yet Takeru is exceptionally courageous. It is also said that his mere presence in that world alone is enough to change the natural course of destiny. Nevertheless, it proclaims that as Takeru yearns for a cute companion, he will certainly be granted exactly that. Takeru believes he is on the verge of death and loses consciousness, but then awakens sometime afterward. Feeling relieved, he looks around and finds Voldius. At the same time, he hears the sound of a baby crying and doesn't understand why Voldius is speaking strangely. Suddenly, a small dragon leaps toward him and starts licking his body. Startled and bothered by how dirty the creature is, Takeru pushes it away. Voldius then tells him to choose a name for the hatchling. After a little thought, he decides to call it Black. Subsequently, Voldius requests that Takeru take the small dragon along, a proposition that thoroughly bewilders him. After all, why would a dragon entrust its own child to a complete stranger? But Voldius insists, claiming that Takeru is strong enough to take care of Black. Committed, he delivers the mithril ore to him and then goes back to the waters of the cave. Having no other choice but to stay with the little dragon, Takeru meticulously cleans him, then asks if he is ready to embark on their collection journey together. And so, in an unfamiliar land, Takeru finds a new companion, a black dragon, his very first true partner in that world. Upon exiting that enormous cave, the very first thing V does is take a little flight. The protagonist believes that crossing the forest at night could be very dangerous, and on top of that, he is absolutely starving. He concludes that the wisest course of action is to set up camp at that very spot and prepare some food. Shortly thereafter, we find that Takeru has access to the underground magical water from the ancient dragon's lair. If you're wondering how this feat was achieved, it appears Vol utilized his magic to establish a direct connection between the protagonist's item box and the spring itself. As for the motive behind this action, this water is extremely vital for nurturing a newborn dragon. V seems absolutely delighted, and in fact offers some of that precious water to the protagonist. He accepts the offer, admitting that it is indeed very smooth and refreshing. Next, Takeru activates a barrier using magic stones, knowing from an encyclopedia he had read that these particular stones are indeed quite valuable. He tries to activate a heating effect to warm up the area, and in doing so, he ends up discovering he can create magic stones with surprising ease. With the fire now prepared, it's time to start cooking, and it's quite clear that Takeru's culinary techniques have been significantly improving. What's surprising is that V also appears to have an appetite for human food. The protagonist offers him a little, but the small dragon ends up burning himself. After learning how to eat warm meals, he becomes fully satisfied, and Takeru finds joy in their shared dining experience. He imagines how utterly boring and tedious it would be if the little dragon could only sustain himself on water. So, he asks V if he misses his father, but the little one simply embraces him, demonstrating that the most important thing for him is to be with the protagonist. Takeru is touched and realizes that V possesses the blessing of the ancestral dragon, a Class B gift. Impressed, he still holds the belief that V needs guidance and discipline to properly develop, and he warns him not to act foolishly even though he's growing stronger. If anything were to occur, Volgus would most certainly devour him whole. But of course V has already fallen fast asleep. On second thought, Takeru realizes he wished for a cute companion, and that wish came true. However, becoming a dragon was definitely something he had not expected. He even begins to ponder if this wasn't some kind of trick played by that god. The following day, Takeru makes his way back up to the very same forest he had accidentally stumbled out of. Now the place no longer appears frightening to him, and he can't quite grasp the reason. Previously, the forest was shrouded in mist and shadows, but now it appears bright and beautiful. While telling V not to wander too far, Takeru decides to use this time to get some work done and collect some Class C items. When he activates his search skill, he realizes there are some very good things nearby. However, V comes back scared, and the protagonist uses his ability to locate aggressive monsters. It seems there are quite a few of them around. He recalls believing his idols scared monsters away, and now he wonders if that effect has already faded. Nonetheless, he remains unafraid. If there are monsters, then there's also loot, so he's quite willing to confront them. However, he speaks a little too prematurely, because a rather ill-tempered creature emerges, a rock falcon, which is an extremely violent and carnivorous giant bird. Compared to V, Takeru considers it quite small and assumes that, given its wings, it would surely provide a decent meal. He uses an ice spell to pierce right through it, intending to collect its body afterward. Subsequently, additional serpent wolves acting as adversaries emerge. It's the first time he's seen anything like this, but rather than being afraid, Takeru just sees more meat to gather. This kid finds opportunity in every problem he faces. He resolves to utilize the quick spell for swifter movement, the reduction spell to lighten his body, and the heart spell to affectionately touch his adversaries in his unique way. He appears to be enjoying himself, even remarking that his long legs are proving to be quite advantageous in combat. With all the enemies defeated, his favorite part comes next, collecting an endless amount of meat. Takaru believes his harvesting efforts were a success, but new monsters continually emerge. Since fighting indefinitely isn't an option, V attempts to lift Takaru and fly off, but lacks the necessary strength unless Takaru employs the reduction spell. Once that's done, they at last ascend into the sky. Takaru cautions that they are ascending excessively, and the alarmed little dragon inadvertently lets go of the protagonist. The result is an utterly absurd and precipitous fall. He can't believe he survived, and as he opens his eyes, he sees the little dragon watching him with a look of concern. Takeru recognizes the area, realizing it's the exact same spot where he had previously made his camp. He asks V about the speed at which he was flying, but it's clear the little dragon doesn't know how to respond. Even so, the protagonist reminds him that he is still human and asks that next time they go with a bit more gentleness. V doesn't seem to grasp it, but Takeru tells him he has faith in him, causing the little dragon's eyes to sparkle. He might not comprehend every single word spoken, yet he grasps the affection and responds with a tight, heartfelt dragon hug. Subsequently, the protagonist remarks that based on his search ability, Thorn Village is approximately an hour's walk away from their current position. He mentions that the region is composed of a Yggdrasil branch, which is a legendary and very well-known tree. V just breathes a little of his mana-filled breath upon a twig, and the branch totally transforms right before their very eyes. Even when attempting to apply logic to what he observes, Takeru is utterly bewildered by the recent events. However, what he does know is that he doesn't want to appear as a gatherer carrying a staff, as he believes it makes him seem like a flashy magician. Suddenly, a terrifying roar reverberates from deep within the forest, instantly putting both of them on high alert. For some unknown reason, V then takes flight, seeming to wish to lead Takeru towards a particular destination. Upon reaching a massive tree trunk, the protagonist finds a blonde elf in a truly deplorable condition. He asks if she'd been attacked by monsters, but she explains that she hasn't. She just hasn't eaten anything for 3 days. Takeru is quite surprised. That frightening roar he heard from afar was simply her stomach making a rumbling sound. The elf asks for some water, and he quickly offers her what he has. She thanks him, relieved, but her stomach continues to rumble like a hungry lion. Takeru then recalls the inn where he lodged, and how they had provided him with some provisions for his journey. So he offers it to the elf, who devours it all in seconds. The meal doesn't just save her life, it leaves her completely invigorated, as if she has recovered some kind of superhuman strength. The elf exclaims that she has never tasted anything so delicious, but Takeru points out that after so many days without food, anything would seem wonderful. He even reflects that in dire situations like these, even just a glass of water and a few stale crackers can truly feel like a lavish banquet. But seriously, the protagonist wants to understand how she could have been without food, especially being so close to the village. The elf explains that she left without much thought and ended up forgetting to pack any provisions. Takeru considers this excuse unacceptable and reprimands her, stating it was an irresponsible act that could have cost her life. The elf begins to get annoyed, and he mentions that she smells quite unpleasant, which is a letdown for him, as he'd always pictured elves smelling like flowers or fresh mint. He literally tells her she smells like excrement, causing her to become absolutely furious. It's obvious that after days out in the open, she would have an unpleasant smell, but to hear it said so bluntly is truly cruel. Feeling offended, she thanks him for his assistance, yet states she will never forgive him for insulting her in such a manner, and with that, she decides to depart. Takeru gathers a few more materials while he is on his way back home. Just beyond the forest's edge, V detects something unusual, and Takeru then notices a carriage drawing near on the road. As it approaches closer, he notices that it is being drawn by a special rank E unicorn horse. The coachman, whose name is Poran, inquires what he is doing all by himself in the forest. Takeru replies that he is going to Thorn Village, which greatly surprises Poran, as the young man intends to travel there on foot. His wife and children observe the stranger with curiosity, and seeing the staff in Takeru's hands, Poran questions if he is indeed a mage. The young man quickly explains that he's merely a collector, which truly impresses Poren, who considers it to be quite a rare profession. He then mentions that he is also on his way to Thorn. Poren offers Takeru a ride, but he declines, explaining that he is too large to fit inside the carriage. The children laugh at his rather unusual appearance, but the eldest son, Palon, nevertheless insists that he come along. Feeling a bit awkward, Takeru eventually climbs onto the back of the carriage. As they travel along, he wonders why all of the children in this world seem to take such a strong liking to him. Poren jokes about their new companion's size, and Takeru apologizes once again for taking up so much space. The carriage driver laughs and says it's no problem to help a Thorn resident in a pinch. He and his family appear to be kind-hearted individuals, which takes Takeru by surprise, particularly observing such young children embarking on a perilous journey. Yunan, Poren's daughter, then presents him with a small gift. Upon accepting the gesture, Takeru questions why the family places such easy trust in a stranger. The youngest son, Kane, clarifies that if Takeru had malevolent intentions, their magical artifact would have undoubtedly signaled a warning. Takeru recognizes the small bell as a magic stone and thinks he could probably make something like it too. Remembering to introduce himself, he says his name, and Poren's wife, Elisa, also introduces herself with a friendly smile. All of a sudden, something begins to stir inside Takeru's bag. It's V, his creature companion. The children hear the sound and become curious, but Takeru attempts to hide it, considering V is a rare monster. However, Elisa points out that it's quite common for adventurers to journey with monstrous companions, so he makes up his mind to let them have a look. When V emerges, the children are utterly enchanted. Poren and Elisa are genuinely surprised to discover he has a little dragon, not knowing that V is actually an ancient dragon in disguise. To keep his secret, Takeru just says it's a black dragon. The family then began to wonder if he was a dragon knight, but Takeru explained that he had simply stumbled upon an egg and hatched it by chance. As V playfully interacts with Takeru, molding him like clay, Poren is utterly astonished that Takeru single-handedly managed to hatch a dragon egg. Takeru inquires of Elisa about the rarity of dragons, and she responds by stating that even dragon knights are a seldom sight, making true dragons an even greater rarity. Considering the games he has played before, Takeru ponders whether dragon knights also exist in this new world. Later, as night descends, the group takes a pause to rest. Takeru utilizes his magic stones to construct a protective barrier. Poren feels relieved knowing they won't be subjected to monster attacks throughout the night. And Takeru mentions that V is going to keep watch over them. As the small dragon flies around them, the family feels quite safe with that powerful presence by their side. As Elisa begins making dinner, Takeru volunteers to handle the cooking duties that evening. He pulls out a set of cooking pots from his storage bag, leaving the children completely amazed, making them believe he is truly a mage. With a smile, he clarifies that it's merely a bottomless storage bag, then promptly begins preparing a meal. As soon as the food is ready, the delicious aroma makes everyone excited. Takeru then invites them all to eat, and the children are the first to try the food, absolutely delighted by the wonderful taste. Elisa enthusiastically praises the food, but Poren remains silent, trembling slightly. All of a sudden, the coachman lifts his face, tears and snot streaming down it, sobbing with emotion, having finally eaten a proper meal after so many days of only dried meat for sustenance. The family laughs at his over-the-top reaction, and even Takeru can't help but chuckle. Poren then insists that there must be some special magic infused within Takeru's food, and the children burst out laughing at their father's playful antics until they completely finish their meal. Following dinner, Poren picks up a guitar and begins to strum, with Elisa singing, thereby filling the entire campsite with a tender tune. Takeru joins the children, playing and laughing together with them, feeling a joy that is both simple and heartfelt. For a moment, he recalls his solitary life back on Earth and feels truly grateful to have encountered such kind individuals in this new world. Once night falls, he tucks V into bed and observes as the small dragon drifts off to sleep. Lying on his makeshift bed, Takeru gazes at the starry sky, pondering how truly happy he is to have been given this new chance at life. This concluded the second episode of the story.